Hey, friend, thank you so much for joining me on this long awaited episode of the Live Well with Josie podcast. I am so excited to finally get this episode out to you today. It has been a long time coming. I've had this episode and a few others in my back pocket that will also be coming out here soon as well. But within the last 6 months or so, we have been so busy around here. We have moved from our old duty station, moved to our new one. We've been all around, I feel like, traveling. Andrew has had trainings and we've been packing and moving and visiting family and all of the things. So we are finally settled in for the most part. We still have a lot of unpacking left to do, but we are pretty much settled in. We are getting our bearings straight here. And I am so excited for you to hear today's episode. Today's episode is with my dear friend and colleague, Holly Bowen. She and I have a lot in common. She is also a nutritional therapy practitioner, restorative wellness practitioner, does functional testing. And to connect with Holly and find her on Instagram, you can search at HoBoWellness, HOBO Wellness. Today's episode is all about her. You are going to hear her story of being diagnosed with MS, her journey through that, her journey through a stem cell transplant, also her IVF journey, her journey with surrogacy, and her advice on living an ancestral-based way. If you enjoyed the episode today, please leave a 5-star review. It is very, very helpful, especially for us to bring back season 2, which I am so excited about, and I would be so grateful. So, share this episode after you're finished listening to it, and without further ado, enjoy today's episode. Welcome to the Live Well with Josie podcast, a space for women like you to enter with an open mind and heart and leave feeling empowered to live your best life full of intention. Here, we learn together and we grow together. Enjoy today's episode. Hi, Holly. Thank you so much for joining us on the Live Well with Josie podcast. We are so excited to have you here today.
Absolutely. I'm so excited that you asked me to come on.
We are going to go ahead and just jump in. The one thing I really appreciate about you is that you were just so willing to come on today and share your journey. I know it is a very vulnerable thing to do, and sometimes it's a very difficult thing to do, but I really appreciate your willingness to do so.
Thank you. It's something that I don't talk about a whole lot, but it's something that I enjoy talking about because I know it can help a lot of people when I'm asked about it, but I I don't know, I don't get to talk about it very much, so I'm really excited for it today.
I'm so glad. I would love for you to be able to discuss your journey of being diagnosed with MS. What were your symptoms and what made you start to think that like something wasn't quite right and maybe you should start getting it checked out, and a little bit about what your process of being diagnosed was like?
I got diagnosed right after college, so it was just a few months after I had graduated college, and I was waiting around to take like grad school entrance exams and kind of a stressful period in life, I would say, because those exams are hard. So that's kind of where I was at when it all happened. But for a very long time, my whole life, like I remember when I was a freshman in high school and I was the pitcher for our softball team, like half of my body just went numb. And I didn't really know why. Like I went to the emergency room and they told me because I was wearing like elastic sweatpants that were too tight on my calves. They were like, it's cutting off your circulation. And then I always kind of had dabbled a little bit in natural alternatives. So I would always go to the chiropractor and acupuncture, and it always seemed to help a little bit. So we always chalked it up to a sports injury when it would come. We always just kind of thought I had a bad back and I was getting pinched nerves, but I would always have tingling sensations that would really impair my ability to play sports. Like looking at me, you couldn't see anything was wrong really, but it definitely like impacted the way I could feel things and how I could hold onto a ball and catching a basketball and all of those things. So it was always kind of weird, but we always chalked it up to just like a back injury. And I was very injury prone. And even when I was 6, I remember when I was in first grade, like I would have periods where I would have a hard time walking into school, like, and I would be like limping and it would go away. And I would have it for maybe 6 weeks and it would be gone for 3 years. And
Mhm.
then it would kind of like happen again, and happen in middle school, happen in high school. And then I got really into CrossFit right after I graduated college, or maybe my senior year in college. I can't exactly remember. And I was doing CrossFit like every day, just loved it, lifting really heavy weights all the time. And all of a sudden I woke up one morning and my half of my body was numb and I was kind of like dragging my feet. I couldn't keep like shoes on my feet. If I was wearing like flats to work, I was working at a bank, so I had to wear like dress shoes every day. And I was just walking weird. And again, I thought like, oh, I did deadlifts last night. I
Mhm.
have another back injury. I hurt my back. It's really easy to hurt your back when you do deadlifts. And so I went to a sports medicine doctor at Michigan State, which was like a fairly good sports medicine doctor since that's the area that I was living in.
Mhm.
And I just, I was like, okay, I'll get like an MRI of my back. Like something's wrong. And this has gone on for a long time. I need maybe more than just a chiropractor because it's not helping. And he was kind of like, they were asking me weird questions. And I was like, this doesn't have anything to do with my back. They were like, and then they ordered an MRI of my brain. Like they didn't even look at my back. And I was like, okay, something's like weird. And I kind of like asked like why they were looking at like my brain and not my back or my legs or knees or anything like that. And they were like, we're just trying to rule things out. And there might be some neurological symptoms that we just want to rule out what's going on there. And then I went to it, I knew they were looking at MS because my doctor actually had a really good friend who had MS, and he kind of like brought it up like, I don't think you have this, but like I don't know even why he kind of prefaced with telling me that before he knew that's what
Right.
I had. But anyways, like I
I've
knew
had
that's
that
kind of
happen
what they were.
multiple times and it's
Yeah,
like, what, like, why are you doing this? Why are you
right.
telling me if you don't know? I've had some people who like told me I had lymphoma. And so I
Uh-huh.
thought I had lymphoma for a couple months and I'm like, what, or like a couple weeks. And I'm like, don't tell somebody it's that
Right.
before because that's causes so much stress in our bodies.
Right. Yes. And so I went and had this MRI done. And then the next day, or maybe a couple days later, I had to go and get tested. Can't even remember what the test is called, but it was okay for me. But I know for a lot of people that have had it, it's like a very painful test. But I think it's for ALS is actually what they were testing me for.
Oh wow.
Um, and the doctor who was going to test me for that, she came in, and this was after I had my MRI. She
Mhm.
came in and like I could tell by her face like something was off because she already had that MRI in front of her when she was testing me for this. She was like, I'm going to call your doctor because I don't really think this test is necessary.
Mhm.
And then I was kind of like, oh my gosh, like she like it's obvious like she knows I have MS. Like she doesn't want to do this test because she already knows what's wrong.
Yeah.
But then my doctor was got her on the phone. He was like, no, just I want to test for everything. Just rule this out. So they did it anyways. And then I went and had my appointment with him. And usually you don't get diagnosed by a sports medicine doctor that you have MS. They send you to a neurologist because they just that's not really like
Scope.
their yeah, it's just not. But it was just so obvious that he told me like right then and there that like had that. And I absolutely love this doctor that I had. Like he told me he like I said, he had a friend that had MS and he was like, I have no doubt in my mind that you're going to do something very, very special and that you're going to use this for like the good and not like this isn't going to break you type thing. And that was just so that was like a really powerful thing to hear from a doctor. You don't usually hear that from doctors at all. No, my trainings with neurologists after that were not good at all. Like, after he referred me out to a neurologist, that was a completely different story. But that was kind of how everything happened. And at the time, I was not living at home. I was living several hours away, working on applying for grad schools, working on a bank. And I instantly just quit my job and I moved back home. And that was kind of what I did for a while because that's a big diagnosis. And to just be on your own, living hours away from everybody, even like my college friends had all graduated and moved away. I just needed support and I needed to just like step away and figure out what I needed to do. And I just kind of quit everything and went back home to figure everything out. So that's kind of where that left me.
Wow. I really resonate with you having different sports injuries. And I had a really traumatic time in high school with volleyball because I had injured my ankle
Mhm.
and I couldn't jump. And so when I would come back down on it, it would hurt so bad. And my coach at the time thought I was faking. And I didn't know how to explain that I wasn't. So, like, she would make me put my foot in ice water the entire practice, almost as like a punishment. And
Yeah.
needless to say, I only played my freshman year because of it. After I had found out that I had lupus my senior year, it all just came down to, oh my gosh, like all these things that were very questionable or like I didn't have answers to, now I have answers to, right? I remember that volleyball coach looking at my ankle and being like, there's no bruises, like there's nothing wrong. I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. Like it hurts so bad. I
Yeah.
don't know what to tell you. And I loved volleyball. Of course, I wanted to stay on the team, but they didn't keep me on the team the next year because I couldn't play. And it was like I could do other things on the I just couldn't be front row, you know. It was very frustrating, but it was a very traumatic time in my life because I couldn't explain it. I don't know if everybody did, but people thought I was faking, but I wasn't, because we look fine on the outside, but we're feeling miserable or terrible. And so I really resonate with that. But I can't even imagine the feelings that you were going through, especially during these times of getting diagnosed, but also them telling you they're testing for ALS and all this stuff, because it's like, what is it? Do I have ALS? Do I have this? And
Right.
that's a very trying time mentally that you had to go through, and then just waiting and being diagnosed at such a young age. A lot of people don't realize it sets the tone for the rest of your life, and it kind of changes you as a person. And I don't know about you, I completely shifted my mentality. I probably wasn't the nicest person for the next couple years. I know I wasn't the nicest person for the next couple years when I was diagnosed. I kind of almost got to the point where I was like, I'm not going to let this control me, and I just did whatever I wanted and acted a little crazy and like did all the college things because I was diagnosed my senior year. But
Yeah.
I know that it shifted me in a way, like I didn't take care of my body, but I instead almost did the complete opposite because I didn't want it to define who I was. So what was your journey with that? How did it change your mentality, or did you actually take it and be like, I am supporting my body right off the bat?
I wanted to support my body right off the bat. And the reason being because I got super big into CrossFit before this happened, this which was a blessing, very much a blessing in disguise, because that really woke me up in terms of taking care of my body. And because I got really big into CrossFit, I had been introduced to Julie Bauer from Paleo MG. So I got introduced to like the world of paleo. And so I started doing like the paleo diet shortly before this happened. So I had kind of just recently been introduced to the whole like root cause food as medicine type mentality. And I just started researching that right away because I was very much all into like the paleo diet. I was just like, oh my gosh, I cheated on my diet because I accidentally had a Tic Tac. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like I was like, I have to restart everything because I
Yeah.
had this. So it's very much like gung ho then. So then I started looking into like the AAP diet and stuff like that. And I didn't really have any direction, and I didn't know the world of NTPs and holistic medicine and all of that. Like you kind of like at that point, I really just had like my doctors and the internet, and that's all I knew about. So because I had been researching that and I had recently moved home, I actually, Gavin and I, my now husband, started dating because I had moved home right when I was diagnosed, because he was home too because he had knee surgery. So we had known each other for a really long time, but since we were both home, we kind of honestly we like synced up on Tinder because we were both home and we were both like sick in bed, and we just like matched and we started dating after that. So he knew what happened, and he knew that I had just been diagnosed, and he actually had brought me the Walls Protocol book. He bought that for me when we started dating because he knew I was super into like paleo and all of that. So that was my approach. So I started really wanting to do things holistically from the beginning, but I was also I feel like this happens to so many who get diagnosed with autoimmune diseases and just chronic illnesses in general that want to explore things more holistically. I like took that idea into my first neurologist appointment and I told them all about it. And he just looked at me and like rolled his eyes. He told me, if he told me that food has absolutely no impact on autoimmunity whatsoever. I can eat all of the things and it won't make any difference at all. Nothing I can do will change the trajectory of my diagnosis. And unless I take the medicine that he prescribed me, that I would be in a wheelchair in a year, like no questions asked. And I'm very stubborn. So I was like, absolutely not. I'm taking no medicine because of this that you put in my head. I'm not even going to explore this. And I did the Walls protocol for quite a while. And yes, it helped me feel so much better, but it didn't completely clear things up. And kind of we came to the conclusion, like as a family, at that time, me and Gavin were like pretty serious after like a year and a half. We're like, this is a serious disease. Let's see what happens if you try one medicine. So that's what I ended up doing. So, I mean, I did kind of a blend of holistic and Western medicine, but that's where it started. And I don't even know if I ended up answering your question.
No, you absolutely did. And I think that also with you being diagnosed after college too, I think that probably helped guide you a little bit more, because then you're not going through college and immersed in all of that behavior and all that stuff.
Right.
And so I know that absolutely did answer my question. And just to kind of go back to what that doctor told you too, I 100% believe that I'm a very faith-based person. And just the fact that this doctor said that you're going to use this to help other people and that it's meant for you for a reason. And obviously, we see these things that can be very painful mentally, physically, and take them as like, why me? But I feel like you've done a really amazing job. And even if you were, why me at first, I think all of us are when we are
Yeah,
diagnosed with
absolutely.
something like this. And that is a very normal feeling. But I think you've done a really amazing job at using that to really preach your idea of what health is, instead of taking what your doctor told you and being like, oh, absolutely, yeah, food doesn't help. Because there are people who truly go and get told that and they believe that. And that's because you're supposed to trust the people who are in charge of your health and who are supposed to help you, right? And
Right.
so it's not always their fault, because they're not even taught any of this stuff. So
Right.
we can go and we can be really upset or angry, or we can just be like, you know what? I know that they're knowledgeable in this specific area of medicine, and I'm knowledgeable in this specific area of nutrition. I'm going to do more research on my own. And you've done a really good job of teaching people how you've done that for yourself and you utilizing that for your own journey.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about why you decided to become a nutritional therapy practitioner.
Yeah, so I feel like all of my jobs were cut a little bit short because of my journey with MS. It was it was a strange timeline. So after college, I was working at a bank and then I got diagnosed and I quit. And I kind of took a year where my family was very supportive of me. It was a huge change. Like it's a huge mindset shift. I wanted to go to all the best doctors, all of these, we were going down to Ohio to the Cleveland Clinic and doing all of these things. And it was just like a lot. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was supposed to be starting grad school. And so I was also seeing, after I decided I wasn't going to see this neurologist and I was not going to pay any attention to him, I started seeing my old functional doctor. And her mom actually has MS too. And she told me, she was like, grad school is the absolute last thing I want you to be doing right now. She was just because she's like, this is such a stress has such a huge impact on this disease. And to put yourself through grad school right now while you're having a full blown relapse and while you're trying to navigate this diagnosis, that's going to be very stressful for you. And that's going to be really, really hard. And just think really hard if that's what you want to do. And I wasn't in a good mindset at all when I had this diagnosis. I was struggling a lot. And so I went back to hair school. I didn't go back to hair school. I went to hair school because I was like, you know what? This is going to be and which I feel bad even saying this now, knowing what hairstylists go through and how hard it is. But I was like, this is going to be like a low stress job. And this is going to be like, I can make my own schedule and I can have more flexibility. And I like doing hair. I think it's fun. And I love makeup and all of that stuff. So I went to hair school and I got a really good job. I loved my boss. She was pretty well known in like the hair industry. She did like hair for New York Fashion Week and stuff like that. And I trained under her and it was really, really cool. I had such a great opportunity to learn and grow really quickly. And I really liked the salon that I was at. But then after a while, we were going through at that point planning our wedding and we were going to get married soon. I was so stressed. I had just finished the point where I was done assisting her for like my year of assisting her and I was working on my own and I'm a perfectionist. And a lot of times when you're doing hair, you're learning like on the spot while you're cutting someone's hair. Like you're doing a new haircut that you've never done before. You're doing a new color that you've never done before. And you're like, I hope this turns out and this person's watching you do this. But then when you're doing it as your job, you have to like pretend that you know what you're doing, like like be very confident in yourself when on the inside you're not at all. And I felt like that every day because I'm such a perfectionist and I want everything to turn out perfectly. More so when I'm working with other people, for myself, not so much, but like when I'm with other people, that's how I am. So that was very, very stressful. So then I started having not like a full blown, but I started having more relapses. My eyesight was really, really blurry. I was losing like sensitivity in my fingers. So it was hard to like, sounds silly, but to like wash people's hair was really hard. To like hold tension on people's hair and hold scissors and cut things the way that it's supposed to be was really, really hard. And this was a few months before my wedding. So I ended up quitting my job doing hair. And then after that, I kind of was like a stay-at-home wife for a while. And that was kind of, I felt like shameful saying that, but that's what I was for a while. But I was just taking care of myself. And I'm very blessed that I was able to do that. And then we found out right after my wedding that like my brain scans had really changed and they wanted me to go on a very strong medicine. And that just didn't sit well with me. So we started exploring other options. And that's what led me to get the transplant that I got, which is called HSCT. And it was an experimental transplant. They've been doing it for like 30 years at that point, but it still hadn't been approved by, I believe it's the FDA that they were seeking approval from. And that's why it was under a trial when I got it done. And I knew several other people. Actually, my parents' neighbors had this transplant done and it just was life-changing for them. So I had the stem cell transplant and that was a few months after we got married. So I felt like I started the process of it. It was a very long process to get this done. Like we had to do IVF, we had to get insurance approval. I had to do all of these steps in order to get my transplant, to start my transplant. So I kind of feel like I got robbed of like my first year of marriage, which was sad because we had put off my neurologist appointments because we were wedding planning and it just didn't work out because we had to drive all the way down to Ohio because that's where I had my appointments at. So then I started the process of getting my transplant in that first year of getting married. And that was really hard. It was, again, at this point, I really hadn't been introduced to the whole like holistic side of things. And I knew what I knew and I knew diet was very powerful, but I didn't know all of the people that are here that can help. So I knew that I didn't want to be on medicine for the rest of my life. I didn't want to keep failing drugs. I didn't want to be on medicines that were associated with like high cancer rates. And you can get what's called PML, which is like a brain infection that's associated with some of these drugs and stuff like that. It just wasn't what I wanted to do. I didn't want to live my life at neurologist appointments and having MRIs all the time and stuff like that. So I had my transplant and then yeah, after that I don't even know what else to say after that. Like now that I say I had my transplant, that's kind of what it was. It was really hard. Like I had to go through high dose chemo. I lost like all my hair, which was hard. That was really, really hard. I had to be really careful about being around people because I got an entire new immune system. But I mean, after like that first year, then I kind of started to get back to normal after a year post transplant.
Wow, what a journey you have been through. That is just such a strenuous amount of change.
This is kind of funny. Like they told me leading up to it, like they're like, you're not going to be able to be around people because we've completely reset your immune system. You like are very susceptible to getting sick, especially after going through that process, being on chemo, having everything like wiped clean essentially. Mm-hmm. And they were like, you're not going to be able to go to the store. You're going to have to wear a mask for a while to go out in public and stuff like that. And then after I got my transplant done, they were kind of like, my doctor was just kind of like, you're fine. Like, your blood work is fine. Like, I went to yoga. Like, I had to be in the hospital for 3 weeks recovering from my transplant. And I had to be in like a special room. I don't even know what it's called, but a special room that was like germ free, I guess. And like the doctors had to wear suits and stuff when they came in. And when I left the room, I had to like put a whole, like, I had to wear like
Your bubble
a
girl.
mask, and yeah, I had to have all the PPE on. But then after like that last day when I got like discharged, they were like, you're fine, you have no restrictions, like your blood work's fine, like everything looks fine. Like, I went to yoga the next morning after I got I'm blanking on discharged. I went to yoga the next morning, and then once I got back up to Midland, I went back to CrossFit like right away. And I felt really, really good afterwards. I mean, it could have been like everything that they pump you through, that just steroids and all that stuff that made me feel good, but I felt really good. So
Huh.
recovery process was so much easier than what I thought it was going to be. Overall, I felt really good. There were times where I got like nauseous weirdly, like throughout that year, and I would throw up just randomly, but that was really like the only weird recovery thing that I had to go through. In terms of everything else, like everything was completely normal except for the fact that like I went through chemo and I lost my hair. That was really like, there wasn't really a recovery from it.
Obviously, you went through so much. You had to be in the hospital for 3 weeks, but you were probably sitting in there thinking, okay, I'm going to have to wear a mask all the time. I'm not going to be able to be around people. And then all of a sudden you get this news that you are okay and that you'll be able to do things.
Right.
I'm sure that was such a relief for you. So at least after all of that, you were able to kind of reintroduce yourself into society in a way that gave you some hope and some relief after everything that you had just been through.
Absolutely.
So I want to know now, with all of that, what does life now look like? Holly and I were talking before we even started recording, but the one thing that you had told us, Holly, was that, or you had told me, is that this was just a trial. So it's not even available to the public. The doctor that was doing it started to do it because this is what he wanted to do. He wanted to be able to offer it to clients like your patients like you, but now he's retired and it's not even really available in the US from what you know of. And so this is something that obviously you were very fortunate to be able to go through. And so if you are going through something like this or anything similar, being able to maybe do a little bit of research. What did you say that was called? What
It
was
was
the
called HSCT. And I know they still do it in Mexico. I believe this is how they do things in, like, MS is treated a little bit differently in different countries. And from what I know, take this with a grain of salt because this is just kind of what I've researched from doing HSCT myself. I think in like Russia and places in the UK and stuff, this is a little bit more mainstream of how they treat MS and even other autoimmune diseases, but not something that they really do in the US. I think there was a few hospitals, I think maybe one in Ohio and then one in Washington that experimented with doing it, but from what I've heard, it really hasn't grown in the US.
Gotcha. Maybe something that we should be looking into more.
Absolutely.
All right. So with that, what does MS for you look like nowadays? Like what does your everyday life look like? Have you had some regressions? Has it been pretty good? What do you do intentionally every day? Do you have like any intentional habits that you incorporate for yourself to really support your body in this state that you're in currently? And then give us a little bit of information about food and lifestyle and how that plays into your everyday life of living with quality.
Yeah, so I think in terms of how I'm intentional now that I've had this diagnosis for a while now. I went and had my transplant and just now I don't even want to say I'm living with MS I mean I am, but I've had this transplant and I like now I'm on no medications. I don't have MS symptoms anymore. I don't see a neurologist. So it's kind of it was like an old me almost. So it's kind of weird because I feel like I don't identify with a group almost anymore. So I am still very, very, very intentional about every single thing that I put in my body. So I just I really focus on nourishing foods and what a food has to offer my body versus before I used to be so much in the elimination mindset of I can't have this and I can't have X, Y, and Z all because they do these things versus now I understand food. I understand how the body works and I'm just so intentional about giving my body the tools that it needs to function correctly, giving all of those nutrients because those are the tools. And without those nutrients, our body doesn't really know what to do. And yes, sometimes eliminating foods can be helpful and they are in a lot of cases, but it's so forgotten that we have to be very mindful about what we do choose to put into our bodies. So putting those nourishing things in. And for me, I focus on a very ancestral-based diet just because that's the most nutrient-dense diet that you can get, having animal-based proteins, things like bone broths. I didn't for a long time, but now I do consume a lot of raw, high-quality dairy that I source directly from a farm. I'm just very, very intentional about putting all of those nourishing things back into my body versus being so in the restriction mindset. And for me, that's made a huge difference in my health of just making sure that I'm providing my body with what it needs versus only just like worrying about not eating gluten and not eating dairy and not eating sugar, because you can still eat a lot of really not good things. By eliminating all of those things, there's still a lot of things that can still fall in that category, but not offer your body anything good. So that's really like the biggest thing I think that I'm very intentional about. I am very intentional about, you know, moving every day, but getting outside and getting sunshine, being intentional about getting the basic things that our body requires that I think a lot of people overlook and a lot of people don't get anymore in our modern society that we used to always get and it wasn't even thought about before.
Absolutely. I completely agree. I mean, supplements sometimes are necessary for certain things because our foods are just so depleted in the nutrients than what they used to be. But I feel like we search so much for all the supplementation when if we incorporate organ meats or if we incorporate, good quality bone broth and the minerals that we can draw out of and eating nose to tail and head to toe and all of that can be extremely nourishing and beneficial for us. And it's just a complete lost way of life. And I think that's something that is really important for people to remember is like disease is so prevalent nowadays. And we have to think of why is that? All the foods that we aren't eating anymore, everything that's been lost in our foods. We don't get as much sunlight. We're on so much electronics. We are, being exposed to all these toxins nowadays. What's in our beauty products? What's in all our household products? But I think what you do is just so amazing how you really teach your community about the ancestral based diet and why it's important and how you incorporate it. And something that we've talked about is that when you have an autoimmune disease and you don't even, like you said, you don't even really identify with that anymore, which is amazing because of what the transplant that you've had, and you're in practically a remission like state that you're in. But if you have an autoimmune disease or are diagnosed, you're often told to stay away from dairy. And there are so many reasons why conventional dairy is not that great for us. There's a bunch of additives, different things like that, completely stripped of all its nutrients. But one thing that we do forget is that dairy in its raw form is the way that it was meant to be consumed, and that is extremely nourishing and nutrient dense for us. So I love that you show and talk about your way of eating, your ancestral-like habits, and how they really benefit you each day. So,
Absolutely.
yeah. So where do you source your food specifically? You said local. What tips could you give others to help them source any like raw dairy or local food?
Absolutely. So the biggest thing for me in finding all of these resources, a lot of people always ask me, they're like, how do you find these? How do you know this is out there? Is I feel like people say this all the time, but it doesn't get put into practice enough, is to truly know your farmer. Like going to the farmer's market is the best way to find these local sources. And even like at my farmer's market in Midland, they don't have raw dairy just to pick up at the farmer's market. But I meet these farmers at the farmer's market who are maybe, selling beef, and they have a connection that they tell you about just by them knowing that I was looking for something that they tell you about to point you in the direction. And it kind of opens up your eyes to all the different farms that are around because they're all connected to each other. But another thing beyond farmers market is I love realmilk.com. That's where I point a lot of my clients to, because you just put your zip code in and it populates different farms that you can go get milk from. And a lot of people complain, they say, I can't get this in my state. Raw milk's illegal, but raw milk's illegal in Michigan. I mean, different states have different types of laws set in place and how you can get this. But it's not illegal if you technically own the cow and that you can get it. So the way you get around that and with a farmer is to buy into like a herd share. So you technically own part of the cow, and then you're paying every month for your dairy, but you're actually paying for your cow, and they deliver the dairy to a location, or you can go pick it up directly from the farm. Yes, it's a little bit more work, and I understand that people don't always have access to that, which you mentioned. I think you mentioned this before we got on the call, but like Kelowna Supernatural, that's like a really good option if a farm's not an option for you. And if it is illegal in your state, it's a really, really good alternative to have that just has an entirely different process of their milk that's going to be closer it's going to be closer to its more natural form than the ultra processed milk that you just get from the store shelf that we don't know where it came from, that has a bunch of additives to it. So that's another option. But honestly, like the rawmilk.com, but also just going to your farmer's market if you can. And then another source for like buying quality meat is eatwild.com too. That can just help you find local farms, and it'll tell you like the types of meat that they're selling. And I really like that one. But there's really great sources online to order meat from. Like there's White Oak Pastures, there is Force of Nature Meats. I love that. There's so many out there. I know I'm gonna say this wrong, but like Apspy Farms, it's ASPY. That's a farm in Michigan that they ship, and they will sell meat that way. So all of those places you can get a lot of good quality meats if you just have to do a little bit of extra looking.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing those. I'll put those in the show notes for anybody listening. And I think that is like you said, it's extremely important to know your farmer. There's so many different farming practices and different farming techniques. So getting to know your farmer and how they farm. And one of the biggest things, when I was talking to Sam from Kelowna on one of the episodes, I come from Ohio, cornfields. I grew up around that. So I am very, very passionate about farmers and just appreciating them and everything that they offer, regardless of the type of farming that they do, because just regardless, they're some of the best and kindest and most respectful people around. But in general, our farming practices are extremely important for the quality of foods that we are consuming. If they're sprayed with herbicides, pesticides, like glyphosate, those things are going to be harming our gut, harming our health. And if they're more GMO based, that's more harmful to our health than as if we were buying more regenerative style foods and milk and dairy and all that type of stuff. So it is important to know your farmer, know how they are raising their animals, what they're feeding them, and because ultimately that is what we are consuming as well. So that is extremely important. But again, we really appreciate any sort of farmers and their hard work, because they are helping feed America, and that's really important. But it is also very important to know where we're getting our foods from. So Kelowna is, again, like you said, one of the dairy products that I do recommend. And so if you can't find that, because it's also very hard to find that, just trying to find whole fat products is more important.
Absolutely.
Because if you're eating the low fat dairy, you're being stripped of all those vitamins and nutrients. There's a lot of processing that's going on.
Like there should only be milk on the ingredient label. There shouldn't be no like added vitamin A or added
Absolutely.
vitamin D or all of that stuff. Like if that's the best you can do, just look for like just the word milk on the ingredient label and whole milk versus, the low fat that's been stripped from all those nutrients like you mentioned.
Absolutely. That's something that you preach a lot, is stop buying everything that's fortified. Make for sure
Yeah,
that it's not fortified. Every time I hear the word fortified, I think of Holly.
that's funny.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I know that this next part here is going to really touch a lot of people, and I'm just really happy that you have offered to share your story with us. And so, one thing that I would love to discuss with you is just your journey with your stem cell transplant and how that impacted your journey with fertility as well. Why you decided to go the route that you did, how you even knew what options you had, and how it has impacted you mentally, physically, anything that you are feeling open to talking about and sharing with us.
Absolutely. So when I first decided that I was going to get my stem cell transplant, it was so fast because it was under that trial. I didn't have a lot of like thinking to do. I didn't have a lot of like, let's seek alternative options. It was kind of like, I have this opportunity. I have to take it right now. I have to decide if I want to do it or not. And when we decided to move forward, they let me know that I needed to freeze my embryos if we wanted to have children in the future. Or they didn't say that I had to, but they said it was a good idea. And they told me that 99% chance I'll be able to have children on my own, but in that 1% case that I couldn't, they would like they knew I would be really upset if I decided to, save the money and not do IVF and not freeze our embryos. So we decided to do that prior to my transplant. And then I went back for my 6-month appointment and everything had went really well. And then we kind of talked to them about, can we start trying for kids? Like, is this okay to do now? And they told me that because my stem cell transplant hadn't been done prior to the trial that they had been doing and prior to recently, they hadn't done it on a lot of younger females. It had been older individuals who were kind of past their fertile years and not wanting to start a family at that point. And the few people that they had followed that did decide to have children post transplant, they found that it was close to like 40% of them had relapsed and went back to the state that they were before the transplant. And they kind of left me with that information. And they told me, if you do want to have children on your own, make sure you wait till you're about 31 to even start trying. And at that point, I was like 25, I think. That's kind of a long time when you're ready to have kids now. And that's even to like even start trying. Like, who knows if you can get pregnant at that point quickly. So they had told me, wait quite a while. And they also told me that my chance of reversing everything that I had went through, that was a huge process and it was really hard. It was just huge in general, that potentially could all be reversed and almost done for nothing.
A 40% chance, which is a big chance.
That's a really big chance.
Yeah.
So, this was like, we were really shocked when they told us this, because this was not like, they knew beforehand, just a few months beforehand, that having kids was something that we really wanted to do. And that information wasn't really shared with us then until after I had done this transplant. And we had a decision to make if we wanted to wait that long, if, we looked into adoption, we looked into a lot of different things and what we wanted to do. And we decided that we wanted to have kids now, but it was a big chance. And even though I know all the things that you can do to support your body with autoimmunity and through food and all of that, it's still a big chance to take. And it wasn't really something that I wanted to risk. So we decided to look into surrogacy. And we found a surrogate fairly close to when we started looking, I guess. And it was someone who we had just met on a surrogacy website by chance, and they had reached out to us. We actually kind of at that point decided that we weren't going to pursue surrogacy anymore. Just we thought maybe adoption was the best route, but then they reached out to us and they wanted to do that for us. And we decided to go pursue that. So we started our surrogacy journey, and that was really, really hard because, as you know, the things that you do to your body and put into your body, and like all of those things really affect your baby for the rest of its life. So me at that point, kind of starting my journey into becoming an NTP, this is when we decided to pursue this. That was a really, really, really hard thing to do because I really micromanage. Not so much anymore, but still at that point, I mean, I'm very, very intentional about how I eat and what I put in my body. But at that point, I even like micromanaged everything, like even more so at that point. And it was really, really hard for me to let go of that and completely trust someone else with not raising my baby, but building or creating my baby the first nine months before it was born, like being responsible for that. So that was really hard for me to just let go of everything and just trust that it was going to be okay to have somebody else do it. And I just really had to learn to like let go of control. and that was hard, but that was really something that we dealt with. And I think that was really the hardest part of it, was just like putting all of my trust in someone else and not being able to choose what I get to feed my baby while it's growing.
You are a mother and you were the mother the entire time, but creating life inside of your body as the mother, giving that control up to somebody else, and then also being in this space of nutritional therapy where we preach and we teach all things nutrition, and having to let go of that control and, like you said, trust somebody else in order to do that. You've shared your whole story here and going through all that, everything you've had to face mentally and physically, and then going through this is a huge thing that you have to go through mentally.
I don't know if it was like the best way to have a therapeutic experience, but I do think it was definitely kind of like, it helped me grow as a person to have to essentially just like surrender all control for that. And I definitely think in the long run, I've became so much of a stronger person. I feel like I'm more level-headed about decisions, and I've really just learned how to let go of the little stuff and kind of just, work with like the ebb and flow of just everything that comes with me. I really feel like I acquired that skill through the process. It came in waves, kind of. Like there were times where like it was really, really, really hard, and there were times that I was like, the best thing I can do is, I had such a good diet before, like when we harvested those embryos. Like I had been on the Walls protocol for so long at that point. I'd been eating organ meats. I'd been taking my desiccated liver. I'd been really nourishing my body for a long time at that point. And I had to have faith in that. And I just had to, pray about things and like know that everything was going to work out the way that it was supposed to. And that was really all I could do. And I had to let go of what I couldn't control. And it took a really long time for me to get in that mindset, and kind of being diagnosed with MS and going through my transplant and everything that led up to that. I really have learned how to let go of what I can't control. And I just had to kind of always remind myself of that through that process.
I think that's so important because, there's a lot of, I have moms come to me and who are past moms or who have struggled to become mothers, and they learn all this stuff about food and nourishment and how that affects your fertility and just the support of your body has a huge impact of all of that in general. And the fact that you were very intentional about supporting that before you created those embryos, then you were able to create those embryos. I'm glad that it gave you a little bit of peace of mind, and without having that control throughout that entire process of the 9 months of Bo cooking in there. I think that a lot of women can resonate with this when they learn all of this information and they've already had children, or
Mhm.
they learn all this information and they're on their second or third, or they've been trying for years and they've struggled with loss, and then they learn so much information, and it can be extremely overwhelming, and it can almost make you probably, I mean, I haven't experienced this myself yet, but I'm assuming, and I'm sure that it probably can make you feel very defeated and almost like you were enough in that time period where, or almost like you didn't do the best you could for your children at that time because you didn't support your body in the way that now you're knowledgeable about. And I think it's important for women in this situation to, like you said, kind of surrender that feeling and surrender that control to you did what you thought was best, or you did your best in your own way. And I think just in general there's a lot of relearning and unlearning, but then there's also that time and place where we truly don't have control, and we truly, even though we want it so much, there's nothing we can do to gain that control, but we have all control over our thoughts and our feelings. And it's okay to absolutely feel a certain way, but working through that and understanding, like you have that silver lining of you did what you could to support in the way that you could. And then now with Bo, you're able to nourish him and give him everything that he needs in the best of your knowledge now.
I think this is something that's really relatable to a lot of moms, regardless if you have autoimmunity or not.
Mhm.
Something that I struggled with so much was, again, like it's so important to nourish our bodies, but also our growing babies' bodies. And in that newborn stage, I knew that I wasn't going to be able to breastfeed. And even though you can induce lactation and all of that stuff, even if you didn't physically have a baby, that again was kind of like teetering that line of that hormonal shift that we were trying to avoid from getting pregnant in the first place if I did that. So we decided that that wasn't a good thing either if we went through the whole surrogacy thing. So an excellent resource is the Weston Price baby formula recipe. That's what we gave Bo, and I'm not kidding you, like all of my mom friends are like, you have the healthiest baby. Your baby never gets sick. Your baby never spits up. Your baby sleeps through the night. He doesn't drool. Like he's not fussy. He's the happiest baby in the world. I mean, obviously every baby's different, but the food that we can provide our baby with has such a big impact on a lot of those things, like their immune system and their temperament and all of that. Like Bo didn't really ever get rashes or anything like that. And just being able to, I felt very defeated that I couldn't breastfeed him and that I couldn't give him that source of nutrition. But I fully believe, like, if you can't breastfeed and if you can't breastfeed and eat like a very nutrient dense diet that can provide your child with that, like, that's such a good resource to look into if someone's struggling with not being able to breastfeed or needs an alternative or supplemental food or anything like that, to be able to look into that.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I know that there were multiple NTPs or others in this space who were sharing that during the formula shortage. I think that that is such an amazing point to bring up, that there are so many, and even there are some mothers who try their best and do everything that they can, and then their lactation for some reason just isn't producing the way that they thought. And so, yes, it can be extremely defeating, but when you have a resource like that and you know that you're giving them something that's extremely nutrient dense, that's also very supportive to the baby's body, that can give you that peace of mind. Holly, thank you so much for sharing all that with us. So many women in general, but just people can really resonate with your story. There are so many things in our life that often go a completely different way than we've expected it to. And I think that you've done so much good in this space of teaching and preaching and being just a light in such a journey that can cause so many people darkness. And you've really done an amazing job seeing the silver lining in your own life. And I think that it can really, teach others that even though we're in this season of life, that there are going to be ups and downs no matter what, and there are going to be different seasons, but it's the way that you truly handle all of your seasons with grace and strength that I truly touches me, and I know will touch so many other people. So
Well, thank you. It's been such a good conversation. I'm so glad you had me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we're going to end with some rapid fire questions. So you've got to get your brain sparking quickly.
I'm ready.
If you could have any superpower, what would yours be?
Wow. Maybe to go back in time. That's the one that's coming up for me.
That would be awesome. Have you taken any personality tests like Enneagram or Myers-Briggs?
No, I get so confused with the Enneagram. I don't even know how to say it. I don't even know if I said that right.
Yeah.
So so many people tell me to do that and they'll like send me what my Enneagram is. And I just like, I don't get it, but I want to. But also it's also always like such a long thing to read that I'm just like, I read all the time for work. I cannot read this and I cannot figure out one more thing. So no. But if anyone ever wants to figure out my Enneagram for me, they can go for it because I
Awesome.
would like to know.
That's so funny. I don't know like other people's Enneagrams. Every once in a while, somebody will say like, I'm an 8 or a 2. And I'm like, okay, I get that. But just because a lot of people are 8s and 2s, I'm like, oh, that sounds like you. But I use it as like a tool to kind of like understand people a little bit better. I don't use it as like identity or anything like that. But I think
Yeah.
it's fun. The Enneagram, I think there is a test. There's a test for that and the Myers-Briggs, but it's interesting.
You know,
So
that's what I'm going to be doing tonight, though.
yeah, if you ever
Now
do
that
it,
you brought it up, that's what I'm going to be doing.
do it. It's so fun. Okay. A meal that you could eat for the rest of your life if you had to eat it every single day for the rest of your life.
It's in the Defined Dish cookbook, her street tacos. Honestly, like tacos in general, they're just my favorite.
Yeah, tacos are great. Okay, 2 things that you could take with you on a deserted island if you knew you were going to be there and could take 2 things.
All right. That's tough. My beef liver, beef liver, definitely. Yes, that would be one. Probably desiccated because I really don't like eating it.
Yeah, you could be like, you could liver king it on a deserted island.
Yes. Can you get unlimited replenishments on the deserted island of beef liver? So beef liver is one. That's so dorky. That's not even fun, but that's one that I would take so I could feel my best.
Hey, it's you. It's good.
So we'll do beef liver, and I'd probably take Bo Baby. Maybe I should take Gavin and Bo. I should take Gavin and Bo and not beef liver. Deserted island. You can't take people with you if you're on a deserted island. Okay, we'll take them. We'll take them.
My rules. My rules. Oh my gosh, that's so funny. All right. Well, thank you so much for just joining us today, answering those questions. I like to end it on a light note, especially when these conversations can be so heavy or so impacted with so much information. Thank you, Holly, so much for joining us today. I hope to have you on again. This was amazing. I enjoy talking to you so much, but I know that others will really enjoy listening to you and learn so much from you. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Live Well with Josie podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please don't forget to leave a comment and review, as we would greatly appreciate it. Also, please remember that nothing discussed here today is to be used as medical advice to diagnose, cure disease, prescribe, or treat illness. These conversations are simply to be used as educational resources for living a life with intention. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook at Live Well with Josie, and my website, www.livewellwithjosie.com. See you next time, friend, and until then, stay intentional.